Rambling gibberish. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special live edition of Rebel HQ. I'm David Shuster. It is so good to have you join us on this day. We've got a lot to talk about, starting with Donald Trump. He seemed to have a very strange week in terms of his cognitive decline, strange in the sense that it's getting worse. Plus, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance got tripped up badly over childcare. If you're the sort of person who thinks that Donald Trump often engages in projection, then this week was a doozy. Meantime, Kamala Harris has rolled out some economic plans and she's getting bipartisan praise. We'll give you the latest polls. We'll have an update on the shooting in Georgia. You're not going to believe some of the latest information coming from there, although maybe you might. And we'll have our story of the week. Plus, in the midst of all of this, we are going to be taking some of your comments. Let's see if any of you are up today. And howdy, everyone, says Mr. Spock. Mr. Spock, good to have you join us. Here's a good t-shirt hat idea. Trump plus Vance equals weirdos. Good money to be made on merch for Harris campaign. Well, you should send them the idea. Mr. Spock, hi, says Ichabod, dear. Okay, let's get started. And we are going to start with some breaking news. There are some new indications that the U.S. economy is cooling off a little bit. The information is mixed. Here's the latest reporting from Fox News based on today's Labor Department report.
We got 142,000 jobs added, created, restored, however you want to define it, in the month of August. That was worse than the 160,000 expectation. The unemployment rate smack in line to the expectation, coming in at 4.2%.
Okay, so 142,000 jobs were added in August. The unemployment ticked down slightly to 4.2%. The reason this suggests the economy is cooling off a little bit is because the numbers are being revised over the last several months, and jobs that had been portrayed as being added to the economy, some of the numbers are being revised backwards. In other words, the economy was not as hot as it seemed like it was a few months ago. And the overall trend is that the economy is creating fewer jobs now than the economy was creating 6 months ago or even a year ago. So it's a mixed bag for the Harris for Vice President Harris in her presidential campaign. I want to read to you what the Washington Post said this morning. It said, economists say the current unemployment rate, combined with healthy but tempered job creation, is robust enough to keep the economy afloat. Layoffs remain near record lows. The share of Americans 25 to 54 years old participating in the labor force remains at long-time highs. And American consumers are still spending big, giving employers reason to keep workers on payroll. In other words, the economy is still humming along. It's just not humming along as quickly or as intensely as it was perhaps 6 months ago. So what does this mean? Well, it means for the economy that the Fed, when they meet in a couple of weeks, they are likely going to cut interest rates perhaps by 0.5 percentage point. That makes it easier in terms of your credit card payments. Your mortgage rates will go down. There is some criticism of the Fed that maybe the Fed is acting too late. In other words, the economy started cooling off and the Fed is essentially going to be juicing it a little bit too late. But the other part about this, which is so interesting, is the politics. This is very much sort of a Rorschach test in terms of where you stand politically. If you're somebody who supports Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and the Democratic Biden administration, you're going to look at this and say, okay, well, the economy is still creating jobs. We're still adding to the 17 million jobs that President Biden and Kamala Harris created in the first 3.5 years of their administration. If you're a Republican, and we're going to hear this a lot from Republicans, they're going to say, oh, no, this is proof that the economy is slowing down. That the Biden-Harris management of the economy is not working, even though, of course, the stock market continues to set record highs. And even though, as we mentioned, in the first 3.5 years, 17 million jobs were created under this Democratic administration. Under the first 3 years of the Trump administration, pre-pandemic, it was 6.8 million. So my sense is that this is a political wash, that this is not going to have a great impact, positive or negative, on the political campaign, and that everything's going to really depend on other issues in terms of the economy. Yes, the economy is the number one issue in the minds of voters. And the question is, okay, who are the voters going to trust to manage the economy, to keep the economy going along? Kamala Harris has had some interesting proposals. Donald Trump seems to be a little bit all over the place when asked about the economy. But again, the latest labor report that had been widely anticipated, a lot of anxiety among economists and even among political strategists about how this might play out. The numbers were not as great as a lot of Democrats had hoped, but they were not as bad as a lot of people had feared. And they were not as bad, perhaps, as some of the Republicans were hoping for. So this becomes something of a wash. And the impact is largely going to depend on where you stand politically. And I have a feeling that now, because of this, there'll be another set of jobs numbers at the end of at the beginning of October to reflect September. But assuming that we stay on this track, this is largely going to be something of a not helping, not hurting anybody. The economy, in terms of how that plays in this election, is going to be determined by other issues other than the latest jobs data. Let's take a look at some of your comments. If I can pull this up. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that. We have a little technical snafu, but no problem with that. I'm going to try to pull up your comments. Let's do this again. Let's try to pull up your comments again. Hey, Laura Quinn. Hello. Ichabod. Wholesale gasoline crashing yet again. Gasoline is $1.91 per gallon. That's actually good news for I would say for the Democrats, as the price of gas goes down. It shows inflation slowing down. Hi, David. Vote blue, says Eric B. Hello, Eric B. Become a member here. Go TYT. And that reminds me, if you really want to help the channel, you can not only subscribe to the YouTube on that little sort of button below, but you can also go to tyt.com and become a member. And there's all sorts of great content that is not available for free over YouTube. Let's move on. There is some evidence growing that Donald Trump's mental decline seems to be intense. Let's do this again because we're live. Let's put up another question. What the heck? Why not? Vote love, not hate. Harris Walz 2004. Okay. All right. There is new evidence that Donald Trump's mental decline is intensifying. Donald Trump appeared at a New York economic club and faced a rather straightforward question about the cost of childcare. Watch this and see if you can understand.
If you win in November, can you commit to prioritizing legislation to make childcare affordable? And if so, what specific piece of legislation will you advance?
Well, I would do that, and we're sitting down. You know, I was we had Senator Marco Rubio, and my daughter Ivanka was so impactful on that issue. It's a very important issue. But I think when you talk about the kind of numbers that I'm talking about, that, because look, childcare is childcare. There's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. But when you talk about those numbers compared to the kind of numbers that I'm talking about by taxing foreign nations at levels that they're not used to, but they'll get used to it very quickly. And it's not going to stop them from doing business with us, but they'll have a very substantial tax when they send product into our country. Those numbers are so much bigger than any numbers that we're talking about, including childcare, that it's going to take care. We're going to have, I look forward to having no deficits within a fairly short period of time, coupled with the reductions that I told you about on waste and fraud and all of the other things that are going on in our country, because I have to stay with childcare. I want to stay with childcare, but those numbers are small relative to the kind of economic numbers that I'm talking about, including growth, but growth also headed up by what the plan is that I just told you about. We're going to be taking in trillions of dollars, and as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kind of numbers we'll be taking in. We're going to make this into an incredible country that can afford to take care of its people, and then we'll worry about the rest of the world. Let's help other people. But we're going to take care of our country first. This is about America first. It's about make America great again. We have to do it because right now we're a failing nation. So we'll take care of it. Thank you. Very good question. Thank you.
The question was, can you commit to making childcare more affordable? And what legislation would you advance? Donald Trump responded by talking about Marco Rubio, Ivanka. He talked about his larger plan, the small price, I suppose, of childcare compared to sort of the larger ideas that he has. He talked about Make America Great Again. He talked about billions. Does anybody really know what he was talking about there? He was literally all over the map. And again, the question is, what are you going to do to help childcare? And the answer could be, well, we're going to make childcare more affordable by giving tax breaks to families that have to send their kids to childcare, or we're going to force insurance companies to cover the cost of childcare, or we're going to stop the price gouging of the people who run childcare and daycare, or we're going to lower what it takes in terms of people working for childcare. So you don't need a certificate if you want to be a specialist. There's all sorts of logical answers, but Donald Trump just sort of rambling, that's not a plan. And when he starts talking about Ivanka and Marco Rubio, and then the second part about this is he's dismissive of this question as if it's beneath him, that, oh, this is small. I'm talking about bigger things. I'm talking about tariffs and tax policy that's going to raise billions, and childcare is very small, as if, don't bother me with the small things. Childcare is small. I don't need to get involved in that. It was a rambling, incoherent, and dismissive response from Donald Trump. And again, this is not a difficult question. You can say, look, I don't think we should do anything to affect childcare. I let the markets figure it out. And people, they want to send their kids to childcare. Well, they need to be able to afford it. Or you talk in general terms about, we're going to make the economy so good for everybody that everybody has more money to spend on things like childcare and groceries and necessities of life. But Donald Trump's answer was just sort of rambling. And the crucial responsibility of any politician is to speak clearly, to make a point. Now, Donald Trump wasn't the only person who got tripped up over childcare this week. J.D. Vance also seemed to insult a lot of people with his response to a question about childcare. Watch this.
Will we lower the cost of daycare? Such an important question, Charlie. And I think one of the things that we can do is make it easier for family models to choose, or for families to choose whatever model they want, right? So one of the ways that you might be able to relieve a little bit of pressure on people who are paying so much for daycare is make it so that maybe like grandma or grandpa wants to help out a little bit more, or
grandma and grandpa wants to help out a little bit more.
maybe there's an aunt or uncle that wants to help out a little bit more. If that happens, you relieve some of the pressure on all the resources that we're spending in daycare. Now, you talk about just daycare. Let's say you don't have somebody who can provide that extra set of hands. What we've got to do is actually empower people to get trained in the skills that they need for the 21st century. We've got a lot of people who love kids, who would love to take care of kids, but they can't, either because they don't have access to the education that they need, or maybe more importantly, because the state government says you're not allowed to take care of children unless you have some ridiculous certification that has nothing to do with taking care of kids. So empower people to get the skills they need. Don't force every early child care specialist to go and get a 6-year college degree where they've got a whole lot of debt and Americans are much poorer because they're paying out the wazoo for daycare.
A couple of things here. Again, J.D. Vance was asked, what are you going to do about the price of childcare? And his answer was, well, let's get grandma and grandpa. Let's have them help out. Or maybe you get your aunt and uncle. You know, Senator Vance, maybe somebody's grandma and grandpa are still working because, and oh, by the way, Republicans want to raise the retirement age for Social Security, so they're going to have to work into even later years in life. Or maybe grandma and grandpa are sick. Or maybe they don't live near their grandkids. Or maybe the aunt and uncle would love to help pitch in, but they're too busy taking care of grandma and grandpa. Grandma and grandpa helping to deal with childcare, that is not a policy solution. A policy solution is, oh, we're going to make childcare and daycare more affordable. We're going to give tax credits. We're going to force insurance companies to cover it. We're going to do things to help people have more disposable income to spend. Now, he sort of got into this idea about, oh, well, maybe we should make it easier for people to work at a daycare or childcare. But he lied in the midst of all that, because when he said, oh, you need a 6-year college degree in order to work at a daycare. That's not true. In order to get an entry-level job in a childcare or daycare, every state simply requires that you have a GED or the equivalent of a high school diploma. That's it. Now, if you want to have a certification, in other words, be a childcare or daycare specialist, then yes, you need a little bit of extra stuff. You need a certification or a credential. And you get that certification by having 4 months of work experience in a childcare or daycare, 4 months, and then taking classes that will take you about online or at an institution 2 months. So you're talking about 6 months to get this special certification so you can make more money. It's not 6 years. And for J.D. Vance not to know this stuff, given that he has kids, it makes you wonder, maybe J.D. Vance just didn't send his kids to childcare. Maybe he had the opportunity to simply have babysitters or nannies at home and never had to worry about this sort of thing. But he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. And for him and Donald Trump to both get tripped up over something this basic, when you talk about families and what they're struggling with and the basic costs for families, you're looking at gasoline, you're looking at grocery prices, you're looking at daycare. A politician who is a presidential candidate or a vice presidential candidate should be able to talk about any one of those with fluency and clarity. But instead, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are all over the map. Donald Trump is rambling. J.D. Vance is suggesting, oh, just get your grandparents or your aunt and uncle to help you out, make it easier. That's nonsensical, and that doesn't address the key policy question that is being posed to these candidates. And this is an issue that matters particularly to suburban women voters, the moderate independent voters that are just tuning into this presidential campaign now, who might ultimately make the difference in terms of who wins. So, amazing, right? Remarkable. Let's get to some of your comments again. I'm trying to pull this up. If you all vote for Kamala Harris and she's victorious, our votes sends Donald Trump to federal prison. Your votes could send that traitor to the USPA, aka federal prison, says Ruben. Well, it could. Pro-life is not pro-child. Kerry makes a good point. I think people who are pro-life, like J.D. Vance, they are simply pro-birth. And then after birth, you're on your own. Although maybe your grandparents can help, or maybe your aunt and uncle can help, but the government's not going to help you with child tax credits. J.D. Vance didn't vote for those. He was offered a political photo op instead of doing something that everybody else in the Senate thought was a good idea. Not everybody else, but most people, and had bipartisan support. But J.D. Vance couldn't be bothered to vote for child tax credits. J.D. Vance can't be bothered to come up with a plan for actually how to help people with daycare or childcare. Instead, it's, oh, grandma and grandpa. Nonsensical. There's another comment. Mr. Spock, says Henry D. Stephen Clark King Jesus. Okay. Let's move on. What are we going to talk about next? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Donald Trump and projection. A lot of us often think that Donald Trump, when he speaks, is not necessarily speaking badly about other people or criticizing other people, but he is simply projecting. It's a psychological state where you subconsciously project certain things into other people that you're really concerned about with yourself. And so when Donald Trump says that people are sleazy or dirty or losers, that he is projecting, that subconsciously he is talking about himself and his own anxieties. Well, listen to the projection that Donald Trump engaged in on Sean Hannity's show the other night. Watch.
Something weird with that guy. He's a weird guy. JD is not weird. He's a solid rock. I happen to be a very solid rock. We're not weird. We're other things perhaps, but we're not weird. But he is a weird guy. He walks on the stage. There's something wrong with that guy. And he called me weird. And then the fake news media picks it up. That was the word of the day. Weird, weird, weird. They're all going, but we're not weird guys. We're very solid people that want our country to be great again. I mean, it's very simple.
So for those of you who are keeping track at home, in 36 seconds, Donald Trump said the word weird 22 times. Also, during his constantly going off about weird and claiming that Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, Vice President Harris's running mate, is weird, not Donald Trump, not J.D. Vance. And by the way, it's Tim Walz that came up with this weird. Donald Trump kept going, weird, I'm not weird, he's not weird, we're not weird. As if Donald Trump is projecting and maybe he has some anxieties about his own sort of weirdness or how unusual he is or how he's not normal. And during this town hall, in addition to obsessing over the word weird, and in my view, projecting, Donald Trump also swatted away some insects. At one point, he said, I hate mosquitoes. I don't think we have them. We don't like those mosquitoes running around. It's actually flying. Mosquitoes fly. They don't run around. We want nothing to do with them. Now, you could argue that Donald Trump's disdain for bugs and mosquitoes, that's pretty normal. And it's not normal that a Fox News town hall would be filled with bugs and mosquitoes, but maybe the insect population is also against Republicans, or maybe it's a sign from the Almighty that I'm going to send some plagues to the Republicans. But in any case, it was it's a little strange for Donald Trump to sort of obsess over one word as much as he did. And the guy who originally came up with the tagline, Donald Trump is weird, and then he and JD Vance are weirdos, Tim Walz also spoke in Pennsylvania. And here's how the governor of Minnesota, the vice presidential running mate, spoke about Donald Trump. Watch.
There's a saying in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing, but I want to say this. I did watch part of it last night. 11 times, Donald Trump explained to us that he wasn't weird. Okay. I didn't say it. I think we might be getting under the skin there a little bit. But look, when I said that, this isn't about name calling or anything. I was pointing out it's weird to be obsessed with people's personal lives. It's weird to be obsessed with people's healthcare choices. It's weird to continue to talk about sharks and batteries and boats and things like that.
And Hannibal Lecter. And with sharks and boats, that goes back to Donald Trump often in his speeches has talked about, has wondered, is it better to die through electrocution because your boat sinks and all the electricity causes you to get electrocuted? Or if there's a shark swimming nearby, would it be better to be eaten by a shark? And Trump says, I'm not going with the shark, I'm going with electrocution. Well, the idea that Donald Trump would just sort of ramble off in that direction, that's weird. The Hannibal Lecter reference that Donald Trump makes all the time comes after Donald Trump makes references to insane asylums and his claims that illegal migrants are coming from insane asylums that are being emptied all over the world. And that has Donald Trump thinking about the most famous, I guess, crazy person that he's ever heard of, Hannibal Lecter, a fictional movie character, and he tries to educate his audience about Hannibal Lecter eats people. To go off on that tangent is kind of weird. And to not be able to keep a solitary, focused train of thought is a sign of dementia. So sometimes people with dementia have and exhibit weird behavior. And now that Donald Trump is obsessing over the word weird, one could argue that Donald Trump subconsciously understands that he perhaps has dementia or mental decline, and he's making up for it. He's projecting the weirdness, the sickness on other people. It's, Donald Trump is a case study for psychiatrists that could go on for decades. And I have a feeling it will. And none of Donald Trump's rambling, cognitive decline, whatever you want to call it, helps him politically, because it shows to a lot of people that Donald Trump is unstable, that he's not providing the sort of stable, focused approach that a lot of people want to see in their president of the United States and want to see in somebody who is the commander in chief. Let's get to some more of your comments. Ichabod. Thank you, Ichabod. It sounds like Trump is injecting too much bleach. I hear you. Trump just made an announcement he'll be adopting Project 2020 policies on civil servants, while he'll be replacing them with loyalists. That's actually in his Project 2025. It's written out that Donald Trump intends to fire 50,000 civil servants, nonpartisan government bureaucrats, and replace them with loyalists who will carry out what Donald Trump wants. You can see if a tornado is coming, but not lightning. Henry. Tabby. Okay. By the way, if you want to follow us on YouTube, just hit the subscribe button below. And as always, if you really want to help TYT and all of our channels, go to the tyt.com page after this live stream and become a member. And when you become a member, that really helps out TYT. Let's continue. This is the week when Kamala Harris unveiled some of her economic plans, and she's getting some interesting critiques and also some encouragement from some unusual places. First of all, here's Kamala Harris in New Hampshire talking about the role of small businesses and what she intends to do as president to help them. Watch.
Cost of starting a new business. So here's the thing. On average, it costs about $40,000 to start a new business in America. That is a great financial barrier for a lot of folks, and it can hold entrepreneurs back. And the current tax deduction for a startup is just $5,000, okay? So then you got to make up the delta there. Got to figure out how you're going to do that. Not everyone has access to that kind of wealth and capital. So part of my plan is we will expand the tax deduction for startups to $50,000. It's essentially a tax cut for starting a small business. Second, my plan will help existing small businesses grow. We will provide low and no interest loans to small businesses that want to expand, and we will, and this is very important, cut the red tape that can make starting and growing a small business more difficult than it needs to be.
Wow. Okay. A couple of things there. I'm going to pull this back. A couple of things there. First of all, Kamala Harris is tackling the key driver of the U.S. economy, and that is small businesses taken together have a greater influence on our economic successes or failures than anything else, than large corporations or anything else. So to the extent that small businesses are doing well, the entire nation, the entire economy is doing well. And so going after small businesses by providing them with some concrete help, a plan so that they can write off not just $5,000, but they can write up to $50,000 off their taxes. That will help spark a lot of small businesses get started. It'll encourage a lot of entrepreneurs who may think, okay, where am I going to come up with this money to do this startup? And it's using the tax code, tax policy to essentially goose small businesses and help the economy. And again, small businesses are the key driver of the U.S. economy. Well, this is an innovative approach. It's interesting. It's compelling to a lot of people. And to a lot of people who think, oh, Kamala Harris is not so great on the economy. Well, all of a sudden, she's injecting an idea into the discussion, into the public policy discourse that's pretty interesting. And oh, by the way, Kamala Harris's plan is getting well received now by some of her most frequent critics, including conservatives, conservative business-minded folks on Fox News and Fox Business. Watch. I'll put this up. Sorry, hold on one sec. I'm going to get it. Don't worry. Okay, here we go.
Needs to be.
It's really hard to think that she's going to walk back on all of that right now.
I just want to press the point. When a political candidate comes up with what I think is a good idea, I have to call it a good idea. And a $50,000 tax cut for small, not tax cut, but a tax credit for startups or small businesses, coupled with less red tape. I got to say, that is a good idea, regardless of our other tax ideas.
While that may be a good idea, it's hard to see how she's going to move forward with it.
It's a good idea. It's hard to see how she's going to move forward with it, said the spokesperson for the Republican National Committee. Well, how she's going to move forward with it is by winning the presidency, having Democrats capture more seats in Congress. And then this seems like it's going to be an easy sell, because when you have even conservatives on Fox News saying, yeah, this is a good idea, this is a proposal that can actually make a difference. And it makes a difference not just with the economy, but also politically. Keep in mind that Kamala Harris still trails Donald Trump by sometimes double digits when voters are asked who's going to manage the economy better, who's got better business experience, who has a better sense about how to manage and keep the economy going. Even despite all the data that shows President Biden and Democrats do better in terms of job creation, in terms of the markets, there's still this perception, because Donald Trump is a billionaire and has been talking about his wealth and his business successes for so many years. There's still a perception out there. A majority of Americans think that he handles the economy and financial issues better. So to the extent that Kamala Harris can cut into that margin, and let's suppose instead of it being 58-42, think that Donald Trump would be better in the economy, if it then becomes 55-45, that helps Kamala Harris, because that's a couple percentage points that people are now saying, oh, I think Kamala Harris actually could be strong in the economy. And given that the economy is the number one issue in this campaign, if Kamala Harris can lower those margins, if she can tighten the race over the economy, that only helps pad her national lead and her lead in the battleground states. She needs to show that she is credible, that she has a plan, that she can handle the economy, that she can make the big decisions. Rolling out an idea like this, which is innovative, which has gotten bipartisan praise, that is really smart in terms of economic policy. It's incredibly smart in terms of political tactics, because just less than 9 weeks until the presidential campaign, for people to be hearing, Oh, Kamala Harris has a good idea about the economy. She's got an interesting idea about how to help small businesses, including mine. Hey, I might get $50,000 in tax credits if I start up this business I've been thinking about doing next year. That moves voters. And it's an incredibly smart strategy, brilliant move by the Harris-Walz campaign to roll it out. And by the way, they rolled it out in New Hampshire, a state that Donald Trump has largely forgotten. And this is the sort of thing that has gotten a lot of attention in the Boston media markets, which spill into Massachusetts and New Hampshire and in Maine. So this is a very, very interesting move politically, economically, a good week for the Harris campaign on the economy. Let's get to a few more of your questions. If I can pull them up here. Trump would tank the economy, says Jeannie Ganrudi. Putin endorses Kamala. Not sure if that's right. It could make it worse for Putin. I think it would make it worse for Putin. I think Putin is just playing around. Ichabod Deer, good deal. Anyone who has children wants people taking care of them properly trained. Trump and Hillbilly Vance do not care about children. I think to your point, if they did care, they would actually have some concrete plans on how to help people and how to help families who have kids in childcare. Let's move on. I'm going to move this. One of America's most trusted political scientists and historians, who is a trusted in terms of, let's start this again. How would you describe Alan Lichtman? Let's try it this way. One of our nation's most credible predictors of U.S. presidential election outcomes is now saying that Kamala Harris will beat Donald Trump. Alan Lichtman, who's a longtime professor at American University, Alan Lichtman, a longtime professor at American University, is how would you say this? Let's try this one more time. One of our nation's most credible predictors of U.S. presidential election outcomes is now saying that Kamala Harris will beat Donald Trump. Alan Lichtman, a longtime political scientist and professor at American University, has correctly predicted 9 of the last 10 presidential outcomes. He has an analysis based on several factors, and here's what he's saying about 2024.
There are 13 key questions, and if 6 or more of the keys go against the White House party, they are predicted losers. That's the Democrats this time. Otherwise, they are predicted winners. And under my system, I found that at most, the Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris, is down 4 to 5 keys, which would still leave her short of the 6 keys needed to enable Donald Trump to get reelected. So based on a system that's been right for 40 years and taps into the structure of elections, I predict a path-breaking election in which we have the first woman president in the country.
And like I meant, just about 30 seconds left, sir. There's still 60 days left in the race. Do you think there's any room for change, especially with Harris and Trump's first debate just days away?
Well, as the great British Prime Minister Disraeli once said, finality is not a word we use in politics, but the keys are the big picture. They don't change easily. And this idea of an October surprise changing everything is a myth. I've always made my predictions before that. They haven't changed, and I don't expect this to change either, although you never know.
You never know.
You never know, says Alan Lichtman, but he knows. And again, he's been right 9 out of 10 times. The one time he was wrong was when the popular vote went the way that he predicted, but the Electoral College went a different way. And the prediction by Alan Lichtman is now being backed up by the latest polling data that's out there. The Real Clear Politics average poll has Kamala Harris plus 1.8. Real Clear Politics essentially averages the last 25 to 30 polls and comes up with this number. Here's some of the specific numbers. Emerson, Harris 49, Donald Trump 47. The margin of error is 2.8. Rasmussen Reports, which is a Republican pollster that Fox News loves to rely on, Harris 46, Donald Trump 47. The margin of error is 3, so that's statistically a dead heat. And by the way, Rasmussen Reports, it is the only poll of the last 10 to show Donald Trump winning. All the rest show Kamala Harris winning. Morning Consult, Kamala Harris 49, Donald Trump 46. The margin of error is 1, so that is outside the margin of error. INI Tip poll, Harris 48, Trump 45. The margin of error is 2.8. ABC News, Harris 50, Donald Trump 46. And in the battleground states, Kamala Harris leads in Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia. Donald Trump leads in Arizona and North Carolina. According to the Real Clear Politics Battleground average, they are tied in Pennsylvania. So that is a very different story than just a month ago, or a little bit longer than that, when President Biden was on top of the Democratic ticket. And President Biden was losing in every one of the battleground states and losing outside the margin of error. Now, Kamala Harris is winning nationally outside of the margin of error in most polls. And in the battleground states, she's winning slightly right within the margin of error or slightly outside in most of the battleground states. And there are a couple ones, Pennsylvania, it's a big one, that suggests a tie. But the trend line keeps moving in Kamala Harris's direction. So again, the polling data, and here we are 10 weeks before the election, the polling data now also backs up the prediction by historian and political scientist Alan Lichtman that Kamala Harris will beat Donald Trump. Whether the victory of Kamala Harris is accepted by Donald Trump, well, Alan Lichtman and a lot of other people don't have a prediction for that. And one could argue that maybe if it's close, Donald Trump's not going to accept the results, and a sizable number of Americans won't accept it either. We'll be back to the same situation we had 4 years ago with court challenges and legal ramifications. But based on all the polling data, based on the predictive factors underscored by Alan Lichtman, Kamala Harris will win the popular vote. She will win the Electoral College. She will be the next president of the United States, the first female president in U.S. history. Let's get some of your comments. There we go. Ukraine still standing against Russia is turning the key towards Kamala. That's a good point, because Donald Trump is an isolationist. Kamala Harris believes in supporting the United States, supporting Ukraine. The presidential election victory for Kamala Harris send Donald Trump to federal prison. Judy Carter, they call random Americans so it doesn't skew for more politically minded people. There's a whole video to be done, interesting one to be done about polling, how these pollsters do it and how they update their information. And by the way, it's worth pointing out that most Americans only start tuning into a presidential election or any election after Labor Day. It's the politically involved, the politically engaged, maybe 40 to 50% of the American population that will tune in before that. But most Americans are just sort of too busy living their own lives and only start to pay attention around now. And that's why developments now, unveiling economic plans, the news cycle matters more. But according to Alan Lichtman, he believes it is essentially set in stone and that Kamala Harris is going to win. Frank, I am still a little worried about Pennsylvania, but Harris could still win without Pennsylvania. She could. The electoral map becomes harder without Pennsylvania. It almost means that Harris would likely have to pick off Georgia and North Carolina and perhaps either Arizona. But you know what? I wouldn't worry so much about losing Pennsylvania. It seems like, there's a great field operation that Senator Fetterman and Senator Casey have helped Kamala Harris establish. The Democrats have spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania, although Donald Trump is investing heavily in Pennsylvania too. But that will, I think whoever wins Pennsylvania will win this election. Let's talk a little bit about some developments coming out of the state of Georgia. In Georgia, Colin Gray, who's the father of the suspected Appalachia High School shooter, has now been charged with involuntary manslaughter, second-degree murder, and cruelty to children. It was Colin Gray's son, Colt, who killed 4 people and injured 9 others when he shot up his high school. Investigators say the teenager used an AR-15 that his father had gifted to him for Christmas last year, and that this Christmas gift of an assault weapon came after the FBI had interviewed both the father and the son about some online threats that had been made to the school about a possible school shooting last year. CNN obtained the audio of that FBI interview with Colin Gray and Colt Gray, the son. Here it is.
Have you heard anybody on Discord when you were using it say something like that? Do you remember?
Like at that time?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I'm not trying to get anybody hemmed up, but like this is some serious stuff.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, he knows how serious it is. Trust me.
Because I'd hate to. My boss was even like, I don't know how old this information is, and if you want to wait till Monday to follow up. And I was like, nah, I'd rather do it now because.
So would we.
Because God forbid something happened and I didn't do my job. I'd feel pretty bad about this.
God forbid something happened. I feel pretty bad about that. Well, imagine how the investigator feels now. He actually spoke to Colt Gray and his dad, Colin Gray, last year about the online threats to shoot up Appalachia High School. They deny that Colt Gray had anything to do with it. And then the father goes and buys his son an assault weapon for Christmas after the FBI had been tipped off that maybe his son was involved. But the father goes ahead and buys his son an AR-15, an assault weapon. And now here we are at the beginning of the school year, and the son, Colt Gray, allegedly uses that AR-15 to kill 4 people, 2 students, 2 teachers, injure 9 others. A couple of things here. That father should be charged. He should face charges of second-degree murder. He should face charges of child endangerment. For him to not keep track of what his son was doing, to essentially give his son the firearms at a time when it was clear to everybody else that his son might have been a problem, shows incredible lack of responsibility. Not only is this in terms of bad parenting, horrible example as a father, but it also shows that that father is deranged. He is a monster. He gave his son an AR-15? Really? That's insanity. And by the way, here's the second point. If our nation had an assault weapons ban, there would be no AR-15 for that father to gift to his son. Maybe the father could have given his son a handgun, and maybe the son might have still gone into school and tried to shoot people with a handgun, but the result would have been dramatically different. And maybe some of those people who were killed would be alive today. So why don't we have a ban on assault weapons? We've done it before. In 1994, the Clinton administration, with some help from Congress, passed the ban on assault weapons. It went for 10 years, and the evidence is clear. Mass shootings and school shootings during that 10-year period dropped. They went down. It is a historical fact. Then, in 2004, under the George W. Bush administration, President George W. Bush and the Republicans in Congress allowed the assault weapons ban to lapse. And when it did lapse, school shootings and mass shootings started going up again. And they've kept going up. And now, in 2022, there were more mass shootings than any year in U.S. history. And since the Columbine shooting in 1999, more than 360,000 students have been on a campus when there's been a shooting. There have been more than 400 mass shootings. And the weapon of choice is constantly an assault weapon. You look at Parkland, you look at Sandy Hook, you look at what happened in Columbine, you look at what just happened here in Georgia, an assault weapon. Why are we having assault weapons in our society? We don't need them. They are weapons of war. You don't go hunting with an assault weapon and then you just destroy whatever you're shooting at. No, you use a rifle or something more precise. There is no good use of an assault weapon in our society. Police don't want the assault weapons. Law enforcement doesn't want the assault weapons. They are a danger. And when they get in the hands of kids, teenagers who are loners, who have an axe to grind because maybe they were bullied or because they don't like their classmates, you are looking at death and destruction. Why don't we have more background checks? Why don't we have red flag laws? Why don't we try to keep better track of who is purchasing these weapons? Well, in Georgia, they decided, no, we don't need any of that. Well, you know what? It is time in states and nationally to ban assault weapons again. We know it works. There's no reason to be having assault weapons in our society. Give them to the military, give them to the police, and make sure that they have absolute responsibility to keep track of these weapons. But the idea that we would allow assault weapons to be in the hands of teenagers, never mind anybody else, but random people who are angry, who are upset, what is wrong with us? What is wrong with our country? All right, a couple more questions, a couple more comments here. Notice there's no political affiliation mentioned yet. Usually it's the first thing that comes out. I imagine we'll find out about the political affiliation of Colt Gray and Colin Gray pretty soon. Steve Forbes calls out nonsense, bad ideas, and proven failure for democracy. Kamala Harris. It's because it's a Republican district trying to hide the truth. I want to add one more thing to this. You raise a good point. There is another side to this, and that is right after the shooting and the news of the shooting came out, there were prayers that were offered by Marjorie Taylor Greene and also the congressman who actually represents that district. Republican after Republican said thoughts and prayers after the shooting. Well, you know what? Thoughts and prayers don't do it now. We don't need prayers. We need action. We need something other than a belief in a deity. If you want to pray for the health and well-being of your fellow citizens, that's fine. But it's time to start praying for Republicans to come to their senses and stop being controlled by the National Rifle Association and do the right thing. Ban assault weapons, increase background checks, take some action, do something. Then if you want to pray, fine. And look, I'll be clear. I don't have a problem with people who pray. I don't have a problem with religion. I don't have a problem if you're atheist, if you're religious, if you believe, if you don't believe. That's up to you. But I do have a problem when people substitute prayers or substitute belief in a God and a deity, and they substitute that for actually doing something that we human beings can do to help one another. We can help one another. We don't have to rely on a God to stop mass shootings or to protect people. We can protect each other by taking some common sense steps. Come on, America. Enough with the thoughts and prayers. All right. A couple more comments here. Yeah. By the way, if you want to see a full video that I did on Marjorie Taylor Greene getting ripped for offering only prayers at the Georgia school, go there. Well, the problem is you took prayer out of school, so this is what you ended up with. No, nice try. Funny. Brian Kemp also offered prayers. Yeah, the governor of Georgia. Remarkable. Okay, let's finish on something positive. And this is our story of the week. In Iowa, a farmer was about to slaughter a cow, a water buffalo to be specific, and he was going to turn the water buffalo into meat, but the animal had a different idea. Right at the time when the farmer was trying to cut him or shoot him, the cow escaped. The cow ran away, escaped from the farm. Police were then dispatched. A police officer caught up with the water buffalo and shot it in the stomach, but the water buffalo still survived. And then police caught up with the water buffalo again. Watch.
Not a real good backdrop here.
Yeah, I know, right?
Do you have a rope or something? Yeah, well, that's we don't have a way to corral it. Figures.
The water buffalo is now going.
Did you see that? The water buffalo jumped over the fence and kept going. Well, this went on for several days. There were sightings. This happened all over Pleasant Hill, Iowa. A number of residents took the words Pleasant Hill, combined it, and started calling this water buffalo, which was also known as an Asian buffalo, Phil. And people started cheering on Phil and posting up updates about, here's where we saw Phil. Phil was seen over here. He was seen by the pond. He was seen by the school. People also started recording and started seeing Phil wander up to some homes. Somebody captured Phil on their door camera, captured in terms of recorded on video, didn't actually capture. And the animal looked nice enough and pleasant. Watch. What a sweet water buffalo. Those big eyes, fluffy ears. How cute. Well, the farmer said the animal had been aggressive, and that's why the animal escaped and why the farmer, I guess, wanted to butcher the animal and turn him into meat. But Phil had other ideas, and so this went on for several days. Eventually, police and law enforcement, with some help from animal experts, were able to corral the water buffalo, get a rope around him. And there was a humane society. There's a group in Iowa that takes care of various animals and provides shelter and whatnot. And they adopted Phil. And this was great news to everybody in the community because they said, after all of this, Phil escaped slaughter. You can't capture him and send him back to the butcher. You can't do that. And the farmer agreed. So the farmer gave up Phil to this animal rescue operation. The farmer also gave up 2 other water buffaloes as well. So now the 3 animals are together. They're going to live a long, happy life on this animal refuge for water buffaloes and other animals. And everybody in Iowa, and Des Moines and Pleasant Hill, and everybody else who's been following this for weeks, everybody's overjoyed. This is the best possible outcome. The animal knew it was going to get killed or something terrible was going to happen. It escaped. It fought for its life, and now it's being rewarded by being given a life at an animal refuge. There's always some good news out there if we look for it hard enough. And that'll do it for this edition of Rebel HQ Live. Remember to subscribe below. Also go over to TYT and check out our channel there. I'm going to put up one more thing. And let's try this. Well, this isn't going to work. I was going to try to put up some music, but I'm being blocked. All right. No music to end the show. Sorry about that. It's probably copyrighted anyway. So there you have it. La da 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 da. That's our show. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great weekend. I'm David Shuster.